Hello and welcome to our webinar today on Alert Sync 2.1. This is our release webinar for it, and it is our best release yet. So we're really excited to tell you about all the cool new stuff we've been working on since the last one. But quickly, just to introduce myself, so I'm Bruce Cullen. I'm the Director of Products here at Cookdown. And without further ado, let's dive in. So what is new? Well, a lot is the short answer. We've been very busy. Let's start with my favourite feature of this release, which is the maintenance mode scheduling feature. So obviously you guys are all very familiar with maintenance mode capabilities in SCOM. The whole idea being that when you want to do some maintenance on an object, a machine, a computer in SCOM, you put it into maintenance mode. You would go and make all your changes, and while that machine was in maintenance mode, you wouldn't get SCOM alerts from it while you were patching it, rebooting it, whatever it was. Really great. Now, when you're connecting SCOM to ServiceNow, you don't want to be having to go into SCOM to manually schedule maintenance mode, which is sort of the status quo today. So ServiceNow, someone would have to go and get a change request approved. When it was approved, they would have to manually email the SCOM guy and say, hey, SCOM guy, please can you put these SCOM machines into maintenance mode for this time? Now, obviously, it's an extra manual step, which is a pain. But also, it's error prone, isn't it? If the SCOM guy misses the email or misses the dates in that email and the time windows, or does it incorrectly or whatever, then, what you'll end up with in SCOM isn't necessarily what you had intended. An entirely manual process, essentially, two worlds separated from each other. It did work, but it wasn't the cleanest of solutions, ripe for automation, essentially. And that's where the latest feature of Alert Sync comes in. So we've taken away that manual process, so that now, from within ServiceNow, you can schedule maintenance mode, which is really cool. And better still, you can actually hook it up with a few extra scripts to change requests, which means the SCOM admin doesn't need to have anything to do with change requests anymore. It's all self-service, essentially, and it's all driven from within ServiceNow, from within your existing change request change process, which can continue to be sort of ITIL compliant and whatnot. So now we give you the ability from ServiceNow to create schedules, to cancel them, and to update them, which is really, really awesome. And like I say, these can also be hooked up to change requests, and I'll show you that in a demo in a minute. My favourite feature of the whole release. Quite simple to explain too, which is great. Next thing to share is some changes we've made to the ways in which you send alerts across to ServiceNow in the first place. So in previous releases, SCOM generated alerts. These were picked up by our internal connector and sent across to ServiceNow. And by and large, things worked pretty nicely. There was one small wrinkle, which is where someone else uses an internal connector to pick up alerts as well. So why is this a problem, I hear you cry? Well, it isn't always a problem. Sometimes this works absolutely fine in the cases where those internal connectors' subscriptions don't overlap. So in this case, let's say the top 6 alerts are critical and the bottom 6 alerts are warning, and our connectors are not set with any overlap, so that the top 6 will get picked up by our ServiceNow connector and the bottom 6 get picked up by the DIRDAC connector. Things will work as expected. You get 6 alerts across in ServiceNow and 6 alerts across to DIRDAC. Great, happy days. What's the problem? Well, the issue is where you have any form of overlap in the subscriptions. So in other words, where you want to send alerts to more than one destination, or to touch them, even just touch them via an internal connector in any way. DIRDAC isn't the only product that uses internal connectors. Kevin Holman, for example, has a free SCOM alert enriching MP you can just download that will change what's in the SCOM alerts description. It's really, really cool, but it uses an internal connector. It doesn't send them anywhere, but it uses an internal connector. So why use internal connector if there's this issue? Let's just quickly cover that one first. Well, answer to that one is really, really simple. It's Microsoft's recommended approach to connecting to SCOM to pull alerts out. And so for that reason, everyone that needs to pull SCOM alerts out has used this approach, which is entirely sensible. So coming back to our scenario here, what happens when both connectors want to pull all alerts? mysteries. All bets are off essentially is the answer, because what will happen is both connectors will make a claim for those alerts, and essentially it's a first come first served basis, which means what you get in ServiceNow and DirdAct in this example isn't going to be all in either case, not very likely anyway. It's likely you'll have a subset in one, a subset in the other, and a pile of errors basically in SCOM in the event log that says connector A tried to claim this alert, but connector B already has it, kind of thing. So really annoying sort of limitation of internal connectors that results in this behavior. So this ultimately doesn't work. So what have we done in AlertSync 2.1? Because obviously, SCOM isn't going to change the way it works. So now, in AlertSync 2.1, we have the option of creating an internal connector as before, but also now a subscription connector. These connectors work a lot more like notification channel connectors work to pull the alerts out of SCOM rather than the internal connectors. Now, what's the difference? Why does this matter? Well, ultimately, in the same scenario where both connectors are trying to pull everything, they both now can. Subscription connectors aren't limited by only being able to pull a single alert once. So you can have overlapping subscriptions without any trouble at all. So what's really important to note now is sort of why all this stuff is important. And really, the answer is this. So, great, you can now send to ServiceNow at the same time as DirdAct, but really when it comes to benefits, it enables you to send to multiple ServiceNow instances, which means that you can send alerts to the same alerts to your dev instance, your test instance, and your production instance, as well as something else that uses internal connectors like DirdAct or Kevin Holman's alert enhancement products, which is really, really cool. Lets you test things before you push them through to production. Great. Next up is our domain separation support. So domain separation, if you're not familiar with it, is the ability to subdivide essentially a single ServiceNow instance into multiple what they call tenants, who effectively see, depending on how deep a level of domain separation you have, effectively looks like an entirely new ServiceNow instance just for each tenant. The whole idea behind this is for managed service providers, basically, so they can have multiple companies in their one ServiceNow instance. In this example here, I've got tenant 1 being the sort of master tenant, if you want, the owning company's tenant, and then 3 separate tenants. So ServiceNow supports this, but it supports it at different degrees depending on how much you want to be able to separate things out. So at the basics only the data itself is separated. So by the data we mean the incidents in the incident table, changes in change requests, CIs in the CMDB, all the user accounts and whatnot are still all in the sort of master domain, if you like, the global domain. Then we have domain level 1, where the tenant data is also separate, and the apps themselves, in which case AlertSync need to send data to the right tenant, essentially. Then we have data process level 2, which is tenant process management, and finally level 3, which is fully separate. Now, lots of work is required for levels 2 and 3 on our part to support different levels of domain separation, but from AlertSync 2.1 we support level 1, where we allow the alerts that SCOM generates to be pushed into ServiceNow's SCOM alerts table, and then the incidents are raised in the correct domain. So the SCOM alerts are held in the sort of global domain, but the incidents themselves are raised in the correct domain. I'll show you how that works in a minute. The next thing to share is some enhancements in the way in which you pick alerts to send across to SCOM. So in the old versions of AlertSync 2.0 and before, you would go to the subscription on the internal connector and you would see some screens like this. So you'd have the ability to pick alerts from a group, from specific targets, let's say a management pack, or based on criteria or a combination of all three. And it works nicely. It just was quite basic. You didn't have much granularity here, really. Whereas now, what you see here is more granular criteria picker. This is exactly the same UI, essentially, as you get when creating notification channel subscriptions. This level of granularity is available there, and it now is in Alert Sync, regardless of which type of alert connector you choose. So you can now specify groups as before, resolution states as before, targets as before, but now you've also got the abilities to pick from severity and priority and to and all these conditions together. And when combining this feature with the previous subscription connectors feature, you get a lot more control over what alerts are sent where. So if you wanted to send, say, all of your SCOM alerts to DIRDAC and to a ServiceNow instance called test, and then only a subset to production, yes, there's overlap between all of that, but it will now work. And you get the granularity to pick which alerts go where, which is great. Next thing to share is now in the ServiceNow Store app, we've exposed the parent object names of each SCOM object that raised alerts. So the top section here, object ID and object parent IDs, these sections here are exactly the same as they were in previous versions. And we use this information, these are the SCOM object IDs by the way, we use this information for making sure that we assign the correct CI in ServiceNow when we're raising incidents, where you have our discovery product as well. And we do this by looking up the SCOM object ID from these lists, which is great. But it doesn't help with creation rules. Is what we realized. And in this list of parents are also, as well as sort of objects, they're also groups. And the groups can be really useful when creating creation rules to route your incidents to the right places, because in quite a few SCOM deployments, rather than just the defaults as there are in my lab, people have gone and created really granular SCOM groups for separating out prod from test and what have you. These will now be exposed in the monitoring object parent names field like this. So you can see in here, if we wanted to pick all of the Windows Server 2016 and 1709 Plus computers by their group, we can now add a condition to our creation rules saying Windows Server 2016 and 1709 computer group, which is really useful for where you've built out a comprehensive group structure in SCOM. Small thing, should make a big difference. Then we have changes to the way we test our connections to ServiceNow. So in the previous versions, there was a button in the UI. You would click test connection and it would return a success or a fail along with an error message if it failed. But it would only run at the point you click the test connection button. They would run as SCOM tasks basically. And that worked quite nicely for a real-time feel. But we realised we were being a bit dumb about this. SCOM is a monitoring tool, right? Let's use it to monitor our connection to ServiceNow. So this is exactly what we are now doing. We have added some monitors to monitor our connection for all the same things as before. So stuff like, can we actually access the destination endpoints? Are the credentials correct? Can we connect to the correct tables? All that kind of stuff. It's just exposed via a monitor, which means you can then alert on issues, which is great, rather than having to go to the Alert Sync UI and hit a button if you wanted to see if things were still working. And the final thing to share is this. So this isn't a plug for us going to a conference somewhere in the world. No, this is the City of Quebec, which is the latest ServiceNow release. We have support for the ServiceNow Quebec release, which is really cool. I mean, technically, we have this in Alert Sync 2.0 as well. I just wanted to highlight the fact that we're always keeping up to date with latest and greatest versions of ServiceNow, and of course of SCOM, that changes a bit less frequently. So that's really great. All right, enough talking, enough slides. Let's dig into a demo. So I'll just hop to my demo lab and show you what it looks like for real. Okay, we're going to start in SCOM, and the first thing you'll see is in the administration pane here, we have two ServiceNow connectors. We've got the old version, Alert Sync 2.0 essentially, and the new one, Alert Sync 2.1. We have them both imported side by side. This isn't a special case. We've done something to the MP to mean you can import them side by side, which is going to speak to something around upgrade, but we'll come on to that in a minute. The next thing you'll notice is the old version up here. You click alerts and you get a simple pane like this. Because with the new version, you can send alerts to multiple places and pull updates on those alerts from multiple places. We've split it out a little bit more granularly to give you the ability to do that. So outbound alerts is just here. So now if we want to push outbound alerts to a single destination, we'd come into here. We'd go add new connection. As you can see, obviously a whole new UI. We're going to put in my instance name, partner test 363, and we're going to make that reflected in the URL as well. Partner test 363, and we're going to push the alerts to our ServiceNow store app, not to event management as well. We're going to enable it. We're not using a proxy. So this is the more complicated criteria picker that I mentioned. You'll be very familiar with it because it's the same one as you would use in a notification channel. We're just going to be really simple here, and we're going to pick all alerts with resolution state raise incident is what we're going to push up. So we're not pushing up everything, but you get the idea. You can combine these as you would do in notification channels. In this version, rather than the configuration being stored as part of the internal connector, we actually save the configuration in a management pack. And this is really useful for kind of migrations and upgrades in the future. Also keeps it nice and separate. So I'm going to use the default one, which will be created for me if it doesn't exist. So now we can specify our sourcing method. So by sourcing method, what I basically mean is, are we going to use an internal connector, like the old version, or a subscription connector, which is what I was discussing in the slides earlier. Now, I've got Alert Sync 2.0 imported here, so I already have an internal connector. So to avoid any clashing, I'm going to pick subscription and go next. On the summary screen, we see what's going to happen, essentially, when this loads. There we go. And we hit finish. One thing I'll say while it's creating this connection here is I had in run as accounts, I already had my accounts set up for my instance. While this test is running, we're going to now go and set up an inbound alert updates connection. So this will pull updates back into SCOM from the incidents raised from that ServiceNow instance. They're decoupled because people don't always want bidirectional sync. Sometimes they're pushing to multiple destination ServiceNow instances, a test one and a production one, let's say, and they only want updates from one of those sources, which is why we separated them out, and to give you different granularity on the options. Partners. This is my ServiceNow instance. And I'm going to give it the ability to close alerts in SCOM when incidents resolve, to reset monitors, and to recurse them. And we're going to turn it on. And this is our timer of 60 seconds. And we're going to save that configuration in the Cookdown MP. There's the summary again. We'll hit finish and create the connection. And then finally, we want to be able to accept maintenance from this ServiceNow instance as well, which is a third connection. You can see why we did these separately, because you wouldn't necessarily want to accept maintenance schedules from your test instance. You might want to set different permissions on each instance. In my lab, partner test 363, it's all okay. In terms of what you can choose to allow, obviously, if you don't create a connection, you can't create maintenance schedules. But you could have one with the ability to create without the ability to cancel or update, or specify these things differently for each connection. But for this one, I'm going to pick everything. No proxy, store them in the default MP, hit finish. Now, the next thing you'll see is when we've created a connection, their state goes directly into testing. There's no test connection button as part of the wizard as there used to be in the old UI. So how this actually works under the covers is when we create the connection, we create a monitor as well to monitor that connection. And the state is reflected in this UI essentially. I may have to refresh the UI to get it to pull through the latest status. I'm going to actually kind of cheat, and I'm going to go to outbound alerts, which would have had time to have run, and you can see that this monitor is now returning green, and we're connected basically. Now, because this is a monitor, SCOM's doing its thing, and in the back end it's monitoring ServiceNow, which is really cool. So if this ever stops working, you'll see it in the UI essentially. Connected, still testing maintenance mode. That's okay. I can come back to maintenance mode then. Just on these monitors then, if I go to the monitoring tab and find, where are we now? ServiceNow connect to Cookdown. So what we actually do is, for both successful and failure tests, we push the data in as events into SCOM, so you can see exactly what happens. So here you can see, for example, outbound connection test successful. I see one just came in there at the top, which I'm guessing is my maintenance one. Maintenance status, yes it is. Successful, good. So these are exposed by the monitor. And if I went into Health Explorer, I'd see the actual monitors themselves. Let's just take that filter off. Under availability, there they go, 1, 2, 3, one for updates, one for maintenance mode, and one for outbound. And on them you can see in the knowledge tab a sensible description of their configuration and what they're monitoring. So that's really cool. So that's the setup done basically. So it's not like much more difficult than the old version, except you can push to multiple ServiceNow instances. So hypothetically, if I did want to do that, I'd come in here and go add new connection. So now let's push some alerts up into my ServiceNow instance. So if I go to active alerts, let's push some things up. Let's find something, anyone really, doesn't matter. We'll change its state to raise incident, which was what was in my criteria. And then we'll go into ServiceNow. In ServiceNow, the ServiceNow store app looks really similar. You'll see one extra node here, maintenance mode entries. Now this is added by an add-on app. So in ServiceNow you have the ServiceNow standard store app, and you have an additional maintenance mode add-on app. I'll explain why we did that in a minute. It's to do with ServiceNow licensing essentially. So if you wanted to put a machine into maintenance, this is where you would go and do it. So you'd come in here and you click new. And you specify what you wanted to put into maintenance mode. Let's pick infra ADO2 or something. You can pick multiples, obviously, limited to computers at the moment. You'd specify when you wanted it to go into maintenance. If I wanted to put this in maintenance immediately, I'd just make sure the time. So ServiceNow currently thinks it's 2 in the morning. I haven't changed it from the defaults, so it probably thinks we're in Las Vegas or somewhere. As long as it's in the past, it will put it in effect immediately. Let's say it comes out today at 5 or something. You can specify who requested this maintenance mode schedule. So if I'm the ServiceNow person simply putting in the data and Abraham Lincoln requested it, you can put it in there. We have the planned flag and the cancel flag as well. So if this is planned maintenance, you would tick planned. In the SCOM, it would make it clear on the maintenance mode schedule that this was planned maintenance. And if you wanted to cancel some maintenance, you would edit a record and come in here and hit cancelled. And that's what you would do. Related task lets you relate it to a change request, but I'll come back to that in a second. If you already have a change request kind of pre-raised, you can go and simply select it. But just for now, we're going to leave that. By hitting submit, it will say this occurs more than 5 minutes in the past. Are you sure? Because obviously this is meant for planning a schedule. So for the future, I'm going to hit yes, and then that should take effect. If I were to go to Windows computers now in my lab and find wherever it is, Infra ADO2, this guy, really soon what we should see is in this column here, it goes into maintenance mode. So we'll wait for that, and while that's happening, we're going to go back into ServiceNow. We're going to now talk about some extra cool abilities. So this is what we're shipping. the ability to schedule maintenance mode from this table in our ServiceNow store app. But obviously what would be really cool is to be able to do this from change requests. Now, this isn't a default feature of the product because different ServiceNow teams will want different, to implement this in different ways, let's say. So we're giving the scripts for how we did this on our website, so you can download them and use them, but this isn't part of our app because we didn't want to sort of mandate a sort of method for doing this for all ServiceNow deployments, because it would end up not having the desired effect with different ServiceNow teams. So if I come in here and go create new change request, a normal one, not an emergency one, let's say, you'll ask for a few bits of information. So who's raised this, who's requested the change. We'll pick our friend Dave Lincoln here, and you fill in all the fields about the change requests, such as, when's it going to be. So let's pick a schedule. Let's say this is June the 24th through to June the 25th or something, just to keep it simple. And you get the idea. We're creating a change request as you normally kind of would. There's a checkbox I have enabled on my change request form called Schedule SCOM Maintenance Mode. When I check this, when this change is submitted, there's a business rule that runs in the background that will submit a new maintenance mode entry to this table we were just looking at to get SCOM, to do maintenance mode. It sort of illustrates what's possible. Obviously, how you go about implementing this will come down to what your ServiceNow team are interested in doing here. You could have, it hidden from the UI and have them all pushed through if all your ServiceNow change requests involve computers that are in SCOM. You could have, have the process be that somebody has to manually enter it and then you link it from the change request. It's entirely up to you. So I'm going to show you what's kind of possible. So we're going to hit submit, and that change request is now in, and what we should see is in maintenance mode entries we have our maintenance mode entry. There it is at the top. So essentially this will then reflect in SCOM at the right time, so you can control maintenance mode here. And here we go, coming back to SCOM now for our planned maintenance mode. We ticked planned here, look, planned, and you can see that Infra ADO2 is in maintenance mode, and it's meant to end maintenance mode in a few hours, which is what we set. So that's really, really cool. If you wanted to cancel this from within ServiceNow, you would go into the change record. So we'd find the one for today, which is this bottom one, the 17th today, and go cancelled, update. And in 60 seconds or so, we'll see this machine comes back out of maintenance mode. And that's the whole idea. Really straightforward. Now, obviously, if you had maintenance mode schedules set in SCOM, ServiceNow wouldn't know about them. Everything has to be initiated from ServiceNow. This is a big step forward in terms of not having to do everything manually in SCOM. So a really cool feature. The next thing to show is if we go back into ServiceNow and go to SCOM alerts. Here are some SCOM alerts I sent across earlier, essentially. Any old one, let's pick on, whatever. If I scroll down to the bottom and go to monitoring objects, you will see that we have, as with in old versions, our SCOM object ID and the object parent IDs. But we also now have the parent names, so we can see the group in which this object belongs. There it is. Operations Manager Health Services group is one. There are multiple groups here, as you would expect, and they're all here. Windows Server Instances group, another example. So the good thing about this is these can then be used in creation rules. So if I went now to creation rules, let's put in a new one for, let's see, and then we want the field in question, parent names field contains 2016, let's say. So let's say we're looking for the 2016 group. That would do the job. because then once we've decided we want to route all incidents from a group in question or a subset, depending on what conditions you put in here, you can specify where in ServiceNow they go. So we can pick an assignment group now. So these all go to this group. Happy days. And that's how you would essentially use that data, which is really, really cool. All right, now's a good point to go back into SCOM and see if Infra-ADA2's come out of maintenance mode, and look, it has. The final thing to show is domain separation quickly. So for that, I'll go into ServiceNow, and this is a creation rule. Conveniently, it happened to be the thing I was in. Essentially, to support domain separation at level 1, as I said earlier, the requirement is that the app that is raising the data, creating the data, needs to specify which tenant that data is raised against, and that is simply done by filling in the company field here. So if you're an MSP and you have domain separation level 1 set up, you would simply fill in create different rules for each of your customers and make sure the company field is set correctly so that the incidents are raised in the correct tenant's domain. Obviously the SCOM alerts will still all come in and still be in a single SCOM alerts table like this. So in SCOM itself, assuming it's a single SCOM management group, you'll need a way of differentiating them. If it's multiple SCOM management groups, you have a really easy way of differentiating them, which is the SCOM management group field in the SCOM alert, which is here. And that is how you would support domain separation. So there we go. All that's left to do now really is just to say a quick word around where you can get it and when you can get it. So the management pack is available right now. If you're a customer, watch your inbox and you'll soon have details about it. The ServiceNow store apps will be a couple of weeks away. Now the reason for this delay is essentially they're going through ServiceNow certification and it's taking a bit longer than expected. But fear not, they're hot on the heels of the MP and will be with you really, really soon. What this does mean is that some of the ServiceNow side changes will be delayed a little, but it's still worth getting the MP because most of the features are in it. Well, all the features that are in the MP are in it. It's the final version. Just a quick word before we end also on upgrades. So the management pack side of things, you saw I was demoing this alongside the existing Alert Sync product, which speaks a little bit about upgrades. So we've created a whole new management pack. So it's versioned separately and it's got a different name as well. I'll explain why in a second. This means that for upgrade purposes, the MP can coexist alongside the old version. So while you're migrating things across, you've got a nice simple path to do so. You would essentially set up the new MP, which doesn't have any sort of dependency or anything on the existing management pack. And you would create a subscription connector and start sending SCOM alerts using that and dial down what you have saved against the subscription of your old one to get everything across. So this will require creating a new connector. So why not go with the in place option? So what we're working on here, you'll see some clues in the list of installed management packs. But like I say, it is a new management pack. In my screenshot here, Cookdown's Snow connector is the old version. This still contains Cookdown Discovery if you're a Discovery customer. We've now released Cookdown Alert Sync as a separate product. You'll get some clues as to what we're doing, but let's just say this is laying the foundations for a exciting new products line, which Alert Sync will be a part of. You'll get some clues in the other MPs that are kind of listed here. All I'll say at this stage is keep an eye on our SCOMathon session. SCOMathon is on the 8th and 9th of June, and our vendor session, we have a vendor session on both days in which we'll be talking about this, what we're doing here a bit more. But this work will lay the groundwork for that and will mean you have an easy upgrade path to that, essentially. So that's the upgrades on the MP side. As far as the ServiceNow store app is concerned, it's a straightforward in-place upgrade from 2, which is good. I did mention earlier the maintenance mode functionality is in a separate add-on app. So this is a deliberate change because in ServiceNow, some customers charge per table. And we wanted to keep the number of tables that we added to our core app as low as possible to reduce costs for people that don't plan to use maintenance mode, but allow the functionality for those wanting maintenance mode as well. The app itself is still free, the store app. Obviously, from the ServiceNow store will be when it's through certification. It's just that extra table that it adds, which stores the maintenance schedules, which ServiceNow may try to charge you for. So that's the reason for that. But the ServiceNow side of things is straightforward. So head over to cookdown.com/alertsync, and customers, look out for our mail, which will contain more information as well as the MP. And if you're looking at this for the very first time, I strongly encourage you to give it a go, basically. We offer free trials of all of our products, so you can simply download it and start playing with it, which is cool. Also, it's worth checking out the demo videos on that AlertSync product page because they include all the features I've sort of skirted over for this release webinar. You can also book a demo with me or one of my team if you want to go deeper on any of the features we've talked about. So that's all I have to say today, except we're on LinkedIn, we're on Twitter, we're on Facebook, and of course via good old-fashioned email at these places. If there are any questions, we'll take them live now. But if not, or if a question occurs to you sort of later down the line, you can obviously contact us at one of these methods. Thank you very much for listening. I hope this has been useful for you. We'll now go to Q&A. Let's see what's coming via the chat. Thank you.